In a world where hustle culture collides with wellness warnings and workplace demands keep evolving, how do we stay sharp without burning out? How do we navigate the endless stream of wellness trends while actually getting results? This is the Work and Wellness Podcast, and I'm your host, Ange Davis. Drawing from my own journey of wins, stumbles, and honest revelations, I'll be bringing you raw, unfiltered conversations with experts and inspiring guests who've been there, lived it, and found a better way. Together, we'll cut through the noise and workshop what it really means to be well in today's workplace. No more choosing between success and sanity. No more sacrificing health for achievement. Whether you're struggling with burnout, searching for purpose, or simply ready to work smarter, not harder, you're in the right place. This is real talk about real solutions for real people. Let's get into it. Hello friends, welcome to Work and Wellness. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Jules Fidele. Julie's a venture builder, founder of the Portfolio Careerist and Future of Work commentator, and she helps corporate women monetize their skills and successfully launch a portfolio career that lights them up, which I love as someone who has just embarked on a portfolio career. She has an incredible corporate executive background and also uses less conventional tools like human design, another thing I love, to help her clients get the best out of their work. Julie and I have followed each other on Instagram for a while now. I love her insights on the future of work and the way that she mixes her really practical skills with human design to help women thrive. I'm so excited for our chat today. Welcome to Work and Wellness, Jules.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. I'd love to just jump straight in, particularly and cover off portfolio careers, because a lot of people, this might be a new term to them, and it's a little untraditional from what we know of the way work is. So can you unpack what a portfolio career means in today's evolving work landscape and how it differs from a traditional career?
Yeah, sure. So actually, portfolio career as a concept is not a new term. It's been around for decades, but it just hasn't been associated to younger people earlier in their career. So generally, what you would see people who have been in a corporate career for around 30 plus years looking to take a step down from their normal traditional executive roles, go into some board roles or pick up some consulting work, that's when they would say, I have a portfolio career. But what we've recently seen, particularly since pre-COVID, we've been seeing a lot more people looking to work in different formats. So essentially all this means is it's monetizing your skill set, and instead of relying on one income stream, you have multiple income streams where you're doing work in a more flexible type of way, you're structuring your work more in a consulting fashion, and really it's giving the flexibility and freedom that people are looking for. And personally for me, I guess portfolio careers is more than just monetizing your skill set. It's more than a paycheck. So for me, it is about having this portfolio life where you're diversifying your learning, your knowledge, your networking, and doing work that lights you up and brings joy and meaning versus just grinding it out for 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I love that. And I wonder, what's your thoughts on why you think we're seeing people do this younger now? So you were sort of saying we were seeing it in the, I guess, older generations once they were doing board work and, maybe winding down their hours. Why do you think people are doing this younger?
Yeah, so there are a few reasons. So from a structural shift point of view, in terms of the way we work, there's a few things happening. So firstly, the OECD suggests that by 2030, over 50% of people are going to work in this fashion, which is a huge change from, say, even 10 years ago, where most people were in a normal traditional corporate job. Companies are reducing full-time headcount, and they're swapping that out for more strategic outsourcing. That's actually increased over the last 18 months to around 25% more strategic outsourcing. So all that means is instead of hiring a head of brand, as an example, this is what I did when I worked for a climate tech startup in the UK. I had a completely flexible team. I didn't have headcount, but I did have budget. So within that budget, I just hired different shapes of people that I needed for that moment in time. And that's what we're seeing across the board, a reduction in full-time equivalent and an increase in strategic outsourcing. And then another huge trend post-COVID is people no longer want to work the 40-hour work week. It doesn't suit the sandwich generation where you have really young children and aging parents and having to try to fit in this really 40 hours a week now going back to the office isn't suiting people. And that's why we're also seeing the rise of the 4-day work week. And I guess to add to that, I am seeing this trend a lot across women and senior women. So women who have had around 10 to 20 years experience. They're just wanting more flexible approach to the way they work. They know they have the skills, and actually in a portfolio career, you can earn up to 3 times as much as your corporate salary working at more flexible hours. So they're just looking at the equation and going, why wouldn't I try something different? Why do I have to fit into this one mold of working when there are so many other work formats?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. That's certainly exactly the bucket that I fit into. I had a 16-year corporate career and have done the same. I wonder, do you think there's still always going to be a place for that corporate structure where there will be a portion of people who that works for, they're happy to do it and they're happy to work in that environment, and then there'll be a portion of people who don't? Or do you think over time everything will transition to this portfolio style of work?
Yeah, a great question. I think about this all the time. There's a couple of cohorts of people. When people are interested in the concept of portfolio careers and I speak with, my advice is, firstly, if you're more junior in your career, so you have less than 10 years experience, as much as I whinge about the corporate environment, it was a fantastic foundation for helping me understand how that tacit knowledge of understanding how you operate in a professional environment, how do you manage stakeholders, all of these skills, it's fantastic for more junior people. And then also those folks who are like a more structured work, they really like the security of a 9 to 5. They don't enjoy going out and finding work. They just want to set and forget, that type of mindset. Those buckets of people don't really suit the portfolio career type of living. And to answer your question, I think there's also always going to be a room for full-time employment. However, I do believe, and what we're seeing in the data is that is shrinking. The amount of full-time equivalent roles is shrinking over time, and we can talk about it later due to a multitude of reasons, including AI and the different shaping of the way we work. And I do think that it's an opportunity for us just to reimagine, what does work look like in its entirety?
I think it's such an exciting time, Jules, isn't it? Because no longer are we being spoken to by the large corporate saying this is the way you must work, but actually we're getting to choose. And if it is corporate work that you want to do, great, that's fine. But also we're getting to choose, well, maybe I want to work differently and combine all of the skills I've developed over my career and be able to do bits of all of those rather than just be stuck in one role. What do you think the biggest challenge is for people when they start their portfolio career? You mentor people starting their portfolio career. What do you see as the biggest challenge when you speak to your mentees?
It's all of the challenges I faced, right? So when you've worked in a really traditional format, you don't need a brand because you are standing behind the brand of the organization. And the process in which you get your income from is really different from a portfolio career versus when you're in a corporate environment. So when you're going to get a corporate job, you do a lot of the upfront work. You get your CV right, you go for interviews, you're in that selling phase. And then once you get the job, you kind of slide into, I don't have to worry about that, I don't have to network, etc. Versus when you're in a portfolio career, you are continuously, you need to be on the cutting edge of your skills. You need to make sure you have a really fruitful and diverse network. And you must be comfortable with selling, right? The integrity-based selling, because that's a part of your income streams either increase, decrease, depending on what phase they're at. So when I speak to people or mentees, that is something that is really quite jarring, the personal branding of it all and the sales cycle. So really feeling like, well, I'm not a marketer and I don't know how to sell. And my advice is always, you've done it all your life, actually. It's just a reframe in terms of how you're doing it in a continuous basis for your portfolio career. And it's not selling per se, it's more building relationships and getting out there and speaking to people. So there are a couple of the things that the biggest barriers to people when I speak to them.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that. I was chatting to someone the other day and they said, how much of your time do you spend doing that versus not? And as an ex-banking leader, which was a sales role essentially, you have to be out there talking to people all the time. And I think I read something the other day that someone has to see you on a touch point 17 times or something like that. I know there's various numbers floating around before they'll even think of you to engage you for whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, actually, I just taught a personal authority session in my club this week, and it's 3 to 17 touch points. So it depends on how close and as we build our personal brands, people build parasocial relationships with us. So it's how many times and how many different spaces and places they've seen you to say, I know Angela, I trust her.
Yeah.
I'm going to reach out to her. So you may have already seen in your own portfolio career that sometimes people reach out to you like they're your friend, and you might be like, oh, who is this? I haven't spoken to you before. But they've built so much of this relationship with you. And that's a large part of what building a personal brand and what your portfolio career is all about.
Yeah, and I think tough for some people who've worked in a corporate environment their whole life where they haven't had to do that, and particularly if they weren't in a sales-based or frontline type role as well, because you need less of that. I want to change tact a little bit, but it's still relevant to what we're speaking about. How do you use human design? And maybe give us a bit of an overview about human design, but how do you use that, I guess, to help people in their portfolio careers to market themselves, figure out their personal brand and figure out the way that they want to work?
Sure. I mean, I love human design. It is a bit of a, some people call it a woo-woo system. I actually call it.
I love a bit of woo anyway.
Let's do it. And what's woo anyway? Exactly. I'm here for it too. So essentially human design is this beautifully complex system that supports you to reconnect with yourself and all the parts of how you naturally operate and show up that you may have thrown into the shadow because society, friends, teachers, etc. have said, no, you should be this way. And your natural inclination has been to be another way. So actually, for me, human design is this permission slip of how you can show up as you. And so the system uses a combination of ancient and modern science. So you would have heard of the chakra system. It has the I Chi, which is an ancient Chinese system. And essentially, it allows you to understand your natural energetics and how that shows up in your daily life. So some people say that if astrology and the Enneagram had a child, it would be called human design. And so essentially human design uses 3 coordinates, which is your date of birth, time of birth, and location of birth in order to get your personalized blueprint. And for me, how I use that information is firstly, it supports people to understand one size does not fit all. The reason why the 9 to 5 doesn't fit most people is because their profile type doesn't suit that type of working environment. That it suits another structure of their day, their week, their month, their year. And that in itself is like a big exhale for people. They're like, I always felt this, but they didn't have words around it. So essentially, from a portfolio career perspective, I help people shape the way they design their portfolio careers. Because, for example, if you're a multi-hyphenate, which is called a manifesting generator in human design, the way you structure your portfolio career is really different to me. You're going to be doing a lot of smaller projects and activating a lot of revenue streams, whereas I'm what we call a builder or a generator, and I build quite depth income streams across a topic. I'm not working on multiple topics. My topic is career development, and I build income streams under that banner. Whereas most people's advice on the internet's around, well, if you want to make 6 figures in 3 months, you've got to launch these online products. And here is the 4-step process. That works for no one except that person, because that's the way they're designed.
Yeah.
And so what it actually also does is it helps you with your natural decision-making process. So humans have 7 different types of ways they naturally make decisions, and we are each allocated a natural decision-making process. So that in itself is like, oh, that's why it never felt right for me to make a decision in the moment, or I need time, I need to feel the emotion. So there's all of these different ways. I can even tell a person the way if they should work in a small or large team, how they should structure their morning or evening, how they can go through conflict resolution and negotiation. So there's so much depth in the design itself, and I use it as a tool among many other strategic tools I've gained from my professional experience in order to support people to build off a new foundation. Instead of building off the foundation we were taught after we finished university, it's like, well, here is a foundation that suits you. Now let's go build off that.
Yeah. I think even you sent me a few little snippets about my human design, and I just found it so interesting to hear and read just different elements. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, you know, you don't know me really. And there were so many things that I thought that is so spot on and so interesting. So I think it's such an interesting tool. And I do believe the more that we have self-awareness around ourselves, the better that we're able to regulate ourselves, succeed in work, and look after our well-being as well.
100%.
So I want to touch on well-being a little bit, and I'd love to know how you see the intersection of well-being and professional success changing. You know, I think we're in a time where well-being is declining for a lot of people. Mental ill health particularly is on the rise. So what are your thoughts on well-being and the professional setting? Do you think that's a part of the reason why more people are going for portfolio careers, because they're finding that the traditional 9 to 5 is impacting their well-being negatively? Just keep your thoughts on it.
I mean, it's such a broad, there's so many ways I can answer this question because I think about this all the time. And I guess there's a couple of things that spring to mind immediately. So firstly, I think when organizations are going well and the market's fantastic, we tend to, invest in people's well-being. We'll give them tools, we'll give them the Calm app, they'll be able to go do a yoga course, etc. But actually, what people need something different. They need the structural design of work to change. They don't want another Calm app.
Yeah.
And so what I'm seeing is that even if you have the best wellness program internally, it's the intentionality behind it. Are you really listening to what the humans within the organization need? And if they do need more flexibility, or if they do need childcare support, that's well-being.
Yeah.
That's what I'm calling well-being. And so I think that there's this, I always talk about this in terms of a relationship breakdown. So I think the employee and employer are going through like this bitter divorce, and the custody battle is over our time.
Yeah.
And so people are getting to the points where, well, in exchange for my time, I used to get job security, and I'm not getting that anymore. I'm not getting the bonuses I should be allocated because we don't have this discretionary spend. So why should I work in this format? I'm going to do something alternative. And that's where I see a flood of people coming to portfolio careers. And I do have some warnings around, jumping right into a portfolio career because it does take time. But I think that's, in my perspective, the whole concept of well-being and work and that intersection. I think people are feeling like it's much deeper than that. The needs run much deeper, and I need something different.
Yeah, I agree so much with you, Jules. I obviously spent a lot of time in organisations, and I speak about wellbeing and tools that individuals can implement. But what really needs to happen in my perspective is psychological safety around talking about what wellbeing means for you and being able to have that conversation, and then what you're asking for being facilitated by the organisation. I think that's really where the change will happen from a wellbeing perspective. You've worked in a lot of incredibly high pressure, high performing roles. Did you ever experience a challenge to your well-being? And if so, how did you tackle it? Was it something that you were aware of at the time? What did you experience when you were in corporate?
Angela, how much time do we have?
Come lie on my couch.
I feel like I need to have like a proper one-to-one with you. So what I will say is I've gone through a couple of cycles in understanding who I am. So, we often teach what we need to learn ourselves. So what I would say is for the first 15 years of my career, I was solely focused on climbing at an exponential rate, the corporate ladder, because I thought money and status and having the big job and all of those external things would bring me happiness and joy. And when I got that in 2017, I moved my life from Sydney to London, and I got the dream job. I got all the ticks, right? Travel, everything was perfect, but I actually had a complete and utter breakdown within 3 months of arriving.
Wow.
And I never was a person, when people used to say they were burnt out, I had no idea what that meant. I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm also in my human design, to bring that back in, I'm a profile type called the builder, the generator. So I can often regenerate and work the 12-hour days and feel tired, but not burnt out.
Yeah.
But what I learned is that when a generator works on things that just do not bring them joy for compounding over years, then one day, bang, they just can't do it anymore. And that was my experience. And so from that is when I started to really explore the inner work. And I became really curious about, well, why am I so unhappy when society says that I should be happy? What I realized is there was this break between what society was saying and what I was feeling. So that's when I got really curious about how I was feeling as a person and getting really in tune with the work that lit me up. And what I discovered was that I didn't love working at these big global organizations, helping those businesses activate new businesses. Like, that was my job, to be a venture builder. Where I found the most joy was supporting women to reimagine their careers and rebuild their businesses. So over a period of 7 years, I was able to take my core skills I learned in the corporate world and then transfer those onto supporting and mentoring women. And that's where I felt a complete new lease on life. But I mean, it took me 7 years to really get there.
And I think I love hearing you say that, Jules, because it took me a long time to transition out of corporate as well. I was building businesses on the side for a long time before I was able to leave corporate. I've really got two questions. The first one is, how did you have the patience? Because I think sometimes when we get to the point where we're fed up and we realize, hold on, this is not lighting me up anymore. How do you have, I guess, the grit and the patience to sort of stay the course, knowing, and I guess not acting emotionally and just being like, out of here, see ya. And then further from that, how did you deal, or did you have any identity shift? Because I'm sensing, similar to me, a lot of my identity was what I did, and there was a big sort of process for me in that. So I wonder, secondly, was there a big process for you in shifting your identity to not being that senior corporate leader?
Oh my gosh, yes. That whole identity piece was, actually, I'll talk to that first. So the identity piece for me, the reason why I stayed so long, if I'm being honest, is because I was so entwined in the corporate identity, right? So I would say there was around 2 years where, and like, let's be honest, like you, I did my MBA in 2009 because I didn't want to be in corporate anymore. And I launched 2 failed businesses. And I just felt like an absolute failure. I'm just like, maybe I'm just not meant to do this entrepreneur thing. And then in 2017, when I had again this other moment of, okay, I have to change something, what I knew for sure was that I didn't want to blow up my life. I had already just blown up my life. I had moved my whole family to the other side of the world, and it didn't work. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how in my life, what I would do is pull a geographic. I don't know if you've ever heard of this term.
No,
have you heard
I
of
haven't.
it?
Tell me.
So actually, it's from the addiction realm. So it's quite often spoken about in the 12-step program. But I heard it from a psychologist. And when I was really uncomfortable and upset at what I was seeing externally, I would make a shift geographically. So what I did in my personal life was when I was 18, I was really uncomfortable with where I was at. So I moved to the other part of the city. I did the same when I moved from Melbourne to Sydney. And then I was super uncomfortable in Sydney with what I was seeing. So I moved to the other side of the world. And so what I learned about myself was wherever you go, there I am. So I still found myself feeling very uncomfortable on the other side of the world. So I thought pulling a geographic and blowing up my life for the last 15 years has not worked. How can I do this differently? So that's when I did the inner work for at least 2 years. I worked with a therapist. I did every single type of modality to get to know myself. And then I realized actually I've always wanted to do personal development and career development, but I was taught when I was quite young that that's not where the money was.
Yeah.
And so that was my process. So I really started in 2017. And then in 2020, I decided that I'm going to get more qualifications. I'm going to start practicing with monetization. And it took me from around 2020 to this year to get to monetize enough in order to leave my executive role.
Yeah, I think, again, it's so good to hear that story, Jules. And the reason I say that is we see so many people online. I don't know if it's just me and my algorithm,
No,
right?
it's me too.
But you see so many people online who are like, I quit my corporate job and now I'm earning $1 million a year. And I just think, I don't know, are you?
Are you though?
Yeah, and it just feels, it feels like for when people are doing it sort of legitimately or in the way that we did, you think, well, hold on, and am I doing it wrong? You know, so I think it's so good to hear real practical stories of the way that it worked in the time that it takes. With having gone through that process, what would your advice be to someone who might be sitting in a corporate role? You know, they're 10, 20 years into their corporate career, but they're feeling like it's not for them, but they're just not sure where to start. They just know that corporate might not be for them.
Yes, I love this question. So what I often say is life leaves you breadcrumbs. So I love people when they come to me and they say, I know I want to do something different, but I don't know what to do. We start to do a bit of personal archaeology, looking into their background, understanding where there were parts of their life that they were really felt expansive and they had a lot of joy. So we always look to the past to then try to build to the future. So for me personally, when I was 9, I was creating personal development posters, right? And so I've always been into this, but I just didn't think I could monetize it. So that was a really good sign. If I also always tell people as well is like, follow your curiosity in terms of what are you interested in without trying to monetize it. Because the minute you try to wrap around a service offering, how much could this make me? How much will I make in a month? This really dampens any sort of creativity and stops you from starting. Because in corporate, we quite often think, okay, well, I'm earning X amount. So when I leave, I need to be earning more or the same. And as you and I know, like that's rarely the case.
Yeah.
It takes time to build up to that. And so, you know, overnight successes are made in 10 years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I count, that's why I'm quite an honest mentor that I always say, don't quit your day job. Don't blow up your life. Your core income becomes an investor into your future.
Yes, I love that you say that because it's exactly what I did. My job was an investor into me studying my postgrad in psychology.
Correct.
And all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think what we can be quite linear in our approach to next steps, but actually, you know, the thing, it might sound a bit vanilla, but the reason why we say them is it is quite squiggly because that's the way life is. It's circular. You can feel like you're going back, but you're actually not going back at all. You're learning in order to implement forward. And so the first year or two with some of my clients is just really exploring their curiosity, investing in skills and capabilities they need in order to monetize in the future. And then we start experimenting. So it's the exact process I would use to launch a business that we launch Portfolio Careers.
Yeah, and I guess as a venture builder in your previous life, it's the perfect intersection, I guess. You're just using it in a different context.
Which, Angela, like I mean, I kind of think about it and I'm like, that's so wild because if you asked me in 2020, I would have told you there is no way in hell I would have ever used my venture building skills, because I was so burnt out that I was convinced I would never use these skills ever again. I just couldn't find a world where I'd have the energy to apply them. But through the exploring, I was like, actually, I love this. It was just the context I was applying it in that I didn't like.
Yeah.
So that's a really another important thing for people. It's some people say, oh, I have no skills, or I hate what I'm doing. And it's like, maybe it's just the context in which you're executing those skills. You might just love the skill itself. We just got to apply it in a different place.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, again, back to the woo, but I'm such a believer in every role has its purpose in your career.
Yeah.
There will always be a reason that might not be obvious right now that will come back as the reason you had that role sometime in the future.
100%. I mean, again, I'm always complaining about the corporate world, but it provided me with all of the skills I use on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for that experience, because I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I want to change tack a little bit, because at the start you were talking about the reason that permanent roles are shrinking, and one of those reasons being AI and technology. I'd love to know your thoughts on the role you see technology playing in the emerging work models, and how that can create more personalized and dynamic work experiences for people.
I mean, I am obsessed with AI. I love it. As a person I have a virtual assistant and contractors that work for me to support me in my different income streams. I mean, AI has supported me to act like I'm a 10-person business. And I think that some people are like, that's really scary, you're taking away jobs, but it is just a new way we will work. So there was an article published, I can't actually remember the author, but, you know, we're going to see the first billion-dollar company led by 10 people or less because of the application of AI. And I think the way that we can approach AI and use it is in such a creative way. So I was working with a woman who is in UX. She's a UX designer, and she was seeing a decrease in that type of role in the the market. And so what we started exploring is, well, what do you actually love doing? And she loved writing. That was like her joy. And one of the new roles out of AI is actually designing a conversational designer. It's called a CX, like that's not customer experience, like a different type of acronym, but it's a conversational designer. So you're going to be writing personalities for the bots.
Right. Gosh.
And so for me, but I've always been in tech, right? Like that was a part of my undergrad. I love tech, always have, and I find that if we can approach technology and how can we embrace this and use this in a way to be more purposeful, I really think it's going to unlock a lot more creativity. So for me, my boring tasks, my AI is doing for me. I am not good at operations. I have automations that do that now, so then I can free myself up and show up online and support my clients. And I think that approaching AI in a way that, from a creativity point of view, is like a reframe, but I do think that it's going to provide a lot more creativity for people.
I agree with you, Jules. Actually, you know, it's funny. I used AI the other day, something totally random, right? I was investing in shares, and I just wanted to, there were a couple of terms that I was just like, what does that mean in this context? And I just thought, oh my God, this is something that you would have spoken to a trader about, but I can do that very quickly and then get on with doing with what I want. And I'm definitely of the view that whilst it might take some jobs, I think there is a human element where we can really dial in on that AI will never take. We just need to be a little more creative about the way that we work. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. If I think about the different, you know, we went from agriculture to industrial age, and you know, if you rewind the clock, people would have thought there was no jobs after agriculture. But then we went into, you know, industrial age, and now we're going into, you know, now we're in the information age, and people are like, well, that's it. If we're not knowledge workers, then we have no value. And I think that is quite a dystopian view. I'm more of a glass half full. There have always been a reimagination of jobs and the way we work. So, for example, in 2000, when I started my degree, one of my degrees was e-commerce. And by the time I finished in '04, the coding that we were using was obsolete.
Yeah, wow.
So it's been happening for like 24 years
Yeah.
now. It's just, it is at a faster rate, but we learn to adapt. And I think that humans are incredibly adaptable. And it's just, it's easy for us to get into doomsday prepping, but I think there's so much capacity and creativity that can be unlocked.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, like anything, I'm a big proponent of your mindset dictates your experience with things. And if we've got a positive mindset around how it can help us, particularly as a solopreneur or, you know, a small business owner, I even think about small businesses in, you know, small towns like the one I live in. There's so much opportunity for people to be using AI to push their business forward. So I think the opportunities are just as bright as some of the challenges that people are raising with it as well. Running your own business now, you know, there is, whenever you run your own business, the opportunity to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How do you bookend that and look after your well-being? How do you sort of make sure that you're not just letting things seep into working back those crazy hours?
I would be lying if I said I have nailed this. And it's really interesting because I was reflecting on this just this week. Because when I was in my corporate roles, they were big roles, but my gosh, I couldn't wait to like clock off and just completely not think about anything. But as I've moved into managing my own company and career, I love what I'm doing. So actually it's hard for me to clock off because I'm like, oh, I just want to do one more thing. And I'm sure you experience this too. And so I like from a human design perspective as well, it's always being in tune with the signals of my body. So what I do know is, firstly, if I'm ever craving sugar and if I crave carbs, because I usually don't eat those two, like I'm like basically celiac, so it kills me and gives me migraines. But sometimes like I'm craving like different things I don't normally eat. And for me, it's almost like okay, something's off track. Because my body is just like, I need something additional to what you're already giving me. So I'm much better at picking up on the signs of when I'm working too hard. But what I do every day without fail, even on weekends, is I have a sacred morning. So I'm a big believer in chronotypes. There's a great quiz. I've done my chronotype quiz. I always knew I was a lark, so I'm a morning person. I get up between 4 and 5, and between 4 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. is my golden time. So every morning I get up, I make my coffee, I do my morning pages, I review what's in for my day, and then I write out how my day is going to go.
As in your positive prediction of how the day is going to go, like
Correct.
what it would ideally look like? Yeah, got it.
Yeah, so every day I do this. I write out, especially when I've had quite a busy day. It's coming up to the end of the year, and you know, sometimes I can fall back into the corporate. You know, it is imprinted in me, like just do this, and I'm just like, hang on, we're working on a new framework. So let's intentionally write that down. For me, the written word and really writing it over and processing it that way is, for me, more helpful than meditation. I do meditate, but I would say my morning pages and journaling is the biggest game changer for me personally. And if I'm missing a day, I feel not quite right. I'm like, okay, I just know how much this sets me up. And exercise as a generator as well, my human design type, I do need to move my body every day. Some profile types are different and they don't need that every day, but I get quite anxious if I don't expend the energy.
Yes. I feel like I'm talking to myself, Jules.
I know. I feel like as you're nodding, I'm like, she knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so I'm really conscious of big, heavy meeting days. Like, how can I get even a 15-minute walk or workout in? Because I do get anxiety.
Yeah,
and
I love that. And I think the beautiful thing about everything you just said, Jules, is that you've taken time to truly understand yourself and your own cues and your own triggers. And I think that's really the underlying key when it comes to well-being too, is you understand for yourself what makes sense and where your triggers are, and to recognize when you're craving chocolate or carbs, okay, something's off here, so what do I need to do? And I think that's amazing, because in today's world, a lot of people are not in tune with that, because we're just moving so quickly and we're so distracted by everything.
Yes. Distraction, you know what's really, it's so funny. Another cue I have, and I don't know about you, but this is super interesting because I've noticed this. I was finding, like, when I'm really exhausted, I just go to my phone, I want to scroll TikTok.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, there was a moment I was eating my lunch and I was mindlessly scrolling, and I get so cross with my son if he ever touches his device when he's eating. And I thought, what are you doing? But I really felt that there was a suppression that was happening, right? Like I wanted to suppress something, so I was distracting myself. And it was really interesting because I thought, how many times am I doing this? Like, what am I not letting come through? So I'm sure you probably see that all the time.
Absolutely. And, you know, but I'm guilty of it too, right? And then I realize, I'm like, hold on a minute. As someone who is naturally, I guess, a generator, go.
Yeah.
Time in solitude for me is actually such a game changer, and not something when I was in the corporate world I ever really allowed myself, because to me it was lazy and unproductive. But over time I've realized, no, it is the time where I get to check in with myself and see what's happening, and my most creative ideas come about from that. But it's not comfortable for a lot of people to be in solitude.
No, and actually you reminded me of another thing that I do, which I could have sworn you would never have me doing, is walking, because I never walked. I was like, excuse me, walking? I run. Like, right? Hyper productivity.
That was me.
I was like, walking, why would you walk when you can run? So there was that. And also I now go on walks without headphones.
You and me both. Silent walks.
Isn't it amazing? It's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer.
It is for me. So I'm like you. I used to meditate, but I don't anymore, because I feel like my constitution works better as a moving meditation, so to speak. So walking without headphones and just noticing, creative thinking has been a game changer for me. So still moving my body, and I feel like the thoughts around, but I'm the same. I leave the headphones and I'm like, okay, how can I learn? What can I listen to?
I know.
And I load up a scientific journal that I can listen to while I'm walking. And now it's just silent.
And that's our overproductive society, right? So I think that's a lot of what I work with in the first months with my clients, is like, we call, in human design, it's called deconditioning. Like, how do you rinse all of the stories, associations, shoulds, coulds, whatever of society, and reconnect with, like, what is it that you want?
God, it's so hard to do because it's so ingrained in us.
You feel guilty all the time. Like, I mean, I even see it in my 10-year-old son, and I'm just like, did I teach you how to be overproductive? Like, it's even the school system. It's very much like overscheduled. So it's all a learning experience.
It is, and I think the more we're aware of it, then at least we can challenge it, and that's all you can do, right? I love everything you're doing, Jules. I think it's so fantastic. You're such a leader and a thought leader in this space. What's next for Jules?
Oh, it's a good question. So I've been doing some 2025 planning. I think what I found interesting about this year is I loved being a bit of a solopreneur. But around my energy type, I do like to lead teams. So I am quite good at being around more people, and actually I miss that. And I thought I didn't, but as I've gotten more connected with myself, I'm looking to grow my team. So that's exciting. And looking to shift the Portfolio Career Club into more of a career development and advisory service versus a product within my product suite. So there's more to come on that, which is exciting.
That's amazing. Where can people find you, Jules? If they want to know more, if they want to follow you and get all of your tips that you so generously share, where can everyone find you?
Okay, there's 3 main places. So there's my Substack. It's called The Portfolio Careerist. I post most days on LinkedIn under my name, Julie Fidele, and also on Instagram, which is the same, Julie_Fidele.
Amazing.
I'd love to meet anyone. Come say hi.
Yes, and you're very active on all of those. So if anyone's got any questions, I definitely recommend giving Jules a follow. I love seeing all the things that you post because I think it's very thought-provoking and it gets us to think differently and outside of the normal construct that we are used to. Thank you so much for your time today, Jules. It's been so insightful. I've loved chatting to you. I feel like I could chat to you for about 3 hours about all of this stuff. But I appreciate your time, and I know that the work and wellness audience will love listening to what you have to say.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Angela. I've loved it.
Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Ange Davis. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.